Please note the roll.
Just
Strike that one. Any public comment? Seeing none?
any emails? No, received?
Nope. Move on to consent agenda items. First is going to be the minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Directors held on April 5th of 2023. Also, the regular meeting of the Michigan South Central Power Agency Board of Commissioners held on March 2nd of 2023. Also, the departmental reports, the Board of Public Utilities operation reports and financial statements for March of 2023. The bills and accounts for period ending April 30th of 2023. And also the power supply cost projections. Is there anything we need to discuss further?
Nope.
Seeing none, I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll support.
Got a motion support. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. Moving on to the regular agenda. First is going to be the water, wastewater financial projection studies. Turn it over to Dawn and the director.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll go ahead and kick this off. As you know, that we've been working on a cost of service study to look at the water, wastewater, electric, and telecom funds to find out a projection as far as how financially healthy they are and how to keep them financially healthy. So Don London's here to talk on the water, wastewater, and there will be an item later on regarding what the results are and what a recommendation is for rate increases on the water, wastewater side. So with that, I will turn it over to Don to go over the report.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to present to you tonight. I am going to share my screen. Paul, are
Don,
you
hold
ready
on,
for
you're
me to?
muted just a second.
Okay.
Okay, try it now, Don.
Okay, hi, good evening. Can you hear me now?
We
Yep.
can,
Yes.
thanks.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you. Yeah, good evening, and thank you so much for allowing me to present to you today. I'm going to review the results of the water and wastewater financial projections. I'm going to talk about some key financial targets, show you where you are financially today and where we anticipate you're moving into the future, and maybe looking at some rate changes to keep the overall financial targets healthy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to just quickly go through this slideshow. You have all of this information in your packet, and I have corresponding numbers to where it falls in your packet in case we want to go over a little bit more detail here. Let me just get my highlighter here so we can go over this. So first of all, real briefly, I'm Dawn Lund. I'm Vice President of Utility Financial Solutions, and we do cost of service studies for utilities across the country, Guam, the Caribbean. We're also instructors for American Public Power Association, and I speak very frequently and on several education committees for American Water Works Association. So I'm here to review the financial projection results of the water and wastewater utility tonight. I'm also going to review the proposed rate design and how that may affect the average customer, the average usage customer. And just a little reminder that we are looking at enterprise funds. These funds are self-sustaining operations. They should, the revenues that it produces in the utility should meet its financial requirements for expenses, to also fund depreciation and a small rate of return in order for reinvestment in the system for long-term reliability. I'm going to start with the water department. I'm going to go over, I'm going to show you a summary that's, it's a 5-year summary, and it's rolling up about 100 spreadsheets into this very small table, but it's a very powerful table. I can go in there and make changes. We've already done that with staff. We've reviewed everything in detail to make sure we're all on the same page, if you will. and to look at how capital affects any rate changes and so forth. So this, I'm going to start off with water. And the three key areas I'm going to talk about tonight are operating income, cash balances, and your debt coverage ratio. I look at these three targets and it helps me balance what type of rate track you might need. In the perfect world, we would meet all three of these fully every single year. However, I try to balance that with impact to the ratepayer. Do we have enough cash in the short term to lean on to get a slower rate track in there or whatever it may be? So what you're seeing right now is a summary without any rate changes. This is telling you what would happen in the water department if you did nothing. So if you did nothing with rate adjustments, certainly you can see that this first year, 2024 projected, we would be operating at a positive operating income. However, I want that operating income to be closer to about $900,000 on average. And what that does is that's about in the water department a 4.5% rate of return. What a rate of return from municipal utility covers is only two things. One is interest expense on debt. Since it's below the operating income line, I need to fund it. And two is the inflationary increase on the assets I have invested in the system. And what do I mean by that? Let's just pretend I have one asset. It's $1 million asset. When I go to replace that in 10 years, it's going to cost me $1.3 million or something more. So the $300,000 in my example is what I'm trying to recoup, the inflationary increase on the assets I have invested in the system. For you guys in water, it's actually a pretty low rate of return. It's a break-even rate of return to fund those two things of about 4.5%. In general, I expect that return to fall between about 4 and 6% for an average depreciated system. So you're on the lower end of what we're trying to fund there. You can see that we start with a positive operating income and it turns to a loss without any rate adjustments. That tells me, you know, we do need to address that area. The next area I look at is the minimum cash reserve I want the system to hold. This is unique to the water department. I look at 4 risk areas. I look at O&M expenses. I want you to have cash on hand to pay your expenses. I look at historical investment in the system. If you have a main break, equipment failure, whatever it may be, I want you to have funds to get the system up and running. I look at debt payments. I always want you to hold your max debt payment for the year. And I look at your 5-year capital improvement program, less any bond issuances. If you tell me you're going to spend $1 million next year, I want you to have $1 million at the beginning of the construction season, so you have the cash on hand to do that. So this is a little over a 200 days cash on hand for a highly rated bond utility. Bond rating agencies like to see that 200 days plus. And so this target is in that range. You can see you're not meeting that target, but the goal here would be to start turning the utility in that direction. The cash, of course, if we did nothing, the cash would turn negative in 2028. The last thing I look at, and then I'm going to take questions, and we can go much quicker in wastewater because these targets are all the same. So I want you to understand them now, and then we can move much quicker through wastewater. But debt coverage ratio, all debt coverage ratio is it's a measurement of debt affordability. Did I cash flow enough from operations in this year to pay my debt service payment? Notice I didn't say, do I have enough cash on hand to pay my debt payment? It's, am I cash flowing enough in each year to pay my debt service payment? And when this is above a 1, you are cash flowing enough from operations to pay your debt payment at least once. Now you can see you've got a pretty decent debt coverage ratio without rate adjustments. Is because the water utility is only about 15% leveraged. You only owe about $2 million on about a $16 million net book value on the system. That's low debt. So I would expect that to be low. And so what we're going to concentrate on today is trying to come up with a rate track that's minimizes the impact to your customers, but certainly turns the operating income around closer to meeting the targets. We might not meet the target. I'm just trying to work you towards that. And then of course, turning our cash balances around to get closer to that minimum. But before I go to the next slide, which is going to show you the rate track, do you guys have any questions on anything I've said so far or the key targets?
I guess the question I have is where are you getting your adjusted operating income number from?
Yeah, great question. So adjusted operating income, I take revenues less expenses. And the reason it says adjusted is I adjust for contributed capital depreciation. You have assets in the system that have been paid for through rates. You also have assets in the system that have been contributed by either grants or developers. Like when you have a developer come in, they build the subdivision out, they don't want to maintain the main in the long term, so they just turn it over to the utility and say, look, we put the main in, we need you to maintain it for us. That's called contributed capital. So for rate making purposes, I have to deduct any depreciation on contributions or grants. If we don't do that, it can be considered double charging your customers. You know, the utility hasn't paid for the asset yet. When they go to replace it in the future, that depreciation on that asset will fall into the rates at that time. Good question. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good question. Any other questions on this?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, so let's talk about how, if you want to see more detail or anything, you've got a little key of where each of these are in your report. That was on page 2. So moving on page 6, you actually have the recommended rate adjustments over the financial projection period. I'm going to talk about what this means to your average customer here in the next couple slides, but we're recommending a 3.9% rate adjustment in each year for the next 5 years. Of course, we always recommend you update this every year with the budget process. We want to make sure our rate track is on target. But you can see that I've turned the losses around to positive every year, and I've tried to stabilize that operating income. I'm trying to balance impact to customers with working slowly over time to our targets. You can see I don't quite meet the operating income target, but what I'm trying to do here is stabilize that cash balance. I want to work it towards that minimum. Now, in this particular plan, we do have a bond in here or some sort of borrowing in the 2027 year to correspond with that capital improvement. There's several things that capital improvement makes up. I did stick that bond in there just to let you know you won't quite be able to do, if the capital improvement program stays on target and you truly spend this every year, you're most likely going to need to find some sort of cash resource for that 2027 year in order to fund that capital improvement program and keep your cash balance healthy. Your debt coverage ratio, of course, is healthy. You're going to see a blip here jumping up. Why is it jumping up when we're actually borrowing? It's because you have debt that falls off this year in 2027. Your debt payment right now is about $450,000. After that debt falls off, one of 2 debts in the water falls off, and you issue this new debt, you'll have about about a $200,000 payment instead of a $450,000 payment. So of course my debt coverage ratio is going to jump up, and it's also going to help my cash balance when that debt falls off. So you got a little thing going on there, that little blip. I wanted to answer that right up front because that looks a little odd there, but that's what's happening. Now I'm going to tell you how this affects your average ratepayer, your average user, your average residential customer. Because percentages can sound scary, but I think when we go to the dollar amount, you might be pleasantly surprised how the impact to the customer. But before I do that, do you guys have any questions on this table?
Yeah, I do have a question. Not that I'm looking to do this, but instead of having a projected bond issue, did you look at a projected rate adjustment that would provide the cash for that capital improvement?
Yes, excellent question. So if we replaced these 3.9s with 6.5% rate adjustments, what would happen to this projection is, honestly, my operating income would be met right around $900,000. So you're working more healthy towards that operating income. Your cash balance with that, removing the bond of $1.5 million would meet about a $2 million minimum as well, meaning your targets turn around quite healthy. That is an option. We stuck to this program because because the program can always be changed in the future. As we get closer to this capital improvement, if we see that we've truly spent $1 million this year, $1 million the next, $1 million the next, and we're truly ready to do the projects in 2027, as we kind of update this projection a little bit and get closer to that period, we can ramp up the rate adjustment should we need to. But that's a great question. You can eliminate that debt with about a 6.5% rate adjustment, preparing for that, and it would get your targets a little healthier quicker.
Thank you.
Good question. And I can give you an idea of how that affects your average payer too on the next slide. Before I go on, are there any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. So I wanted to give you a little reminder because this is the results of the cost of service study. This year, you guys did a financial projection. You need to do a cost of service study about every 3 to 5 years, or when there's a significant change in operations. You weren't quite at the period of getting a full cost of service study. It saves you money, of course, to do a financial projection instead of a full study. So what we did is we look at the results of the cost of service study, your previous one. What that tells me is what your current monthly charges are compared to what the cost of service study showed back then. Our customer charges need to go up slightly. Okay, this is the old results of the cost of service study. How do I use this? I use it by saying, okay, I know that their monthly customer charges can go up. I have room to stabilize the ratio between that fixed charge and the commodity rate. When we can get that fixed charge as close to cost of service as quickly as possible, it's going to stabilize revenues. And it's sending that fair price signal. It's based on a very detailed formula to determine what that should be. Now you're going to see a little bit opposite in wastewater. In wastewater, you were pretty much on the cost of service basis for the customer charge already there, if you will. I don't know if you recall, but we've had a couple of rate increases historically in wastewater. We had an opportunity to get that customer charge up a little higher to close to cost of service where it should be. So when I show you the next slide, which is, let's take a 5/8 inch meter. That's your a regular residential meter. You're currently charging $16.50. We're proposing to move that to $17.50. And you're currently charging the first 1,000 gallons. Your first tier is $2.40. We're proposing to move that to $2.48. What that means to your average customer, I'm going to flip back to this slide in a second here, but what that means to your average customer for water uses between about 6,000 and 8,000 gallons a month. So I want to look at those two. And what that means for your average customer for the rate adjustment recommended is about $1.50 to $1.65 a month rate increase. So the percentage sometimes can sound scary, but when we break it down to dollar impact, you have very reasonable water rates. The US EPA standards right now for water affordability is the mean, and it's about $98 a month. And I haven't actually looked at that in about 6 to 9 months, so I'm sure it's gone up by now. But anyway, $98 a month is US EPA standards for water affordability. You can see that you're well under that range. And this, again, this increase would impact your a regular residential customer using a 5/8 inch meter, using 6 to 8,000 gallons a month, about $1.50 a month. Do you guys have any questions on anything I covered in water?
Nope.
Okay, let's jump to wastewater. I can go much quicker because the targets are exactly the same. I look at operating income, I look at cash balances, I look at debt coverage ratio, I adjust operating income by contributed capital. If we were to do nothing and not change rates, you can see your operating income deteriorating, your cash balances as well. And we need to prepare we need to get our financials in the best shape we can for that possible expansion in 2026. Currently, you're about 50% leveraged in wastewater. So you do have, you do have a little bit more debt in wastewater than water, about 50% leveraged. So that debt coverage ratio isn't going to be as healthy as as you saw in water. However, it's still pretty healthy until we get to about 2027 without rate adjustments. For revenue bonds, your ordinance is most likely needing to meet a minimum of a 1.25. For financial planning purposes, I want you to meet at least a 1.45 there. So what this tells me, looking at these key targets, is we most likely should try to stabilize that operating income. We should stabilize that cash burn, and we should try to turn that debt coverage ratio a little bit healthier over the projection period. So what I've recommended here is 2.9% rate adjustments each of the 5 years. Of course, we want to update this to make sure everything's on track. Capital budgets are coming in different than what they've had in the past. Expenses are going up. We want to make sure we stay on track here. You can see the 2.9% stabilizes that operating income. I'm just trying to levelize that out. It stabilizes my cash burn. And of course, I'm meeting that minimum on that debt coverage ratio that I like to see of a minimum of at least a 1.45 in that year that we had specifically dropped lower. So what does this mean to our average customer? Our average customer using a 5/8 inch meter, I'm actually proposing, and it's more of just a rounding technique. It's easier for a customer service rep to remember, like when they get calls, hey, what are you charging for a 5/8 inch meter? It's easier to remember rounding numbers. It is, at least for me. I simply moved that from $29.65 to $29.50. It's not a material decrease, but that commodity rate went from $3.15 to $3.33. So I put more on the commodity rate. That's following the results of the cost of service. Typically, the customer charge is the most controversial component of a customer's bill. There's a reason to set it where it should be. So we definitely want to get it there like we're trying to in water. But I'm sensitive to the fact that if you're going to get a call and a complaint, it's most likely going to be on the customer charge. So I did follow cost of service in wastewater. What does that mean to my average customer? So my average customer using 5,000 to 8,000 gallons a month with a 5/8 inch meter, it's going to affect them about 75 cents to $1.30 max. So within that range for an average customer. Now you're going to see that the larger users will see a more significant impact, and that's because we've pushed it to that variable rate and tried to be sensitive with that customer charge since we've basically met cost of service on that currently. Do you guys have any questions on wastewater?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, well, that's actually all I have for you as far as a presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Paul, if you want me to stay on the line, it looked like you had another thing to discuss and then you were coming back to rate changes. Let me know. I can wait and see if you guys have any questions now, or I can wait later.
I I would prefer for you to stay on. I know Tom's going to go over a quick budget talk, and part of the budget talk goes also into the rates that's been proposed here. So if you can stick on the line in case there's any question, that'd be awesome.
Sure. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn off my camera and mute. And if you tell me to jump back on, I certainly will do that.
Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you, Don.
Next is Tom with the 2023-2024 fiscal year budget projections.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What we're going to do tonight is really a status update, talking about kind of where we are in the process a little bit versus the final presentation. But with Dawn talking tonight, it was a good time to kind of go over everything. And like I said, it seemed appropriate. Next month, we'll be back with some final budget numbers. Good. Okay, so Nikki's got up the 5-year capital plan, and there's capital plan for each one of the funds. I'm not going to go through them specifically. The point is that we have them. These are fluid, but they're very important, especially obviously in the water and wastewater, because the rates that we charge, and I want to make sure this is very clear to everybody listening, the rates that we charge aren't so much about how much it costs to pull water out of the ground and put it back into the environment. It's really about how much it costs to get that water from the ground safely to the customer's house and then get it safely out of the customer's house. And so the infrastructure costs, especially in water and wastewater, are they're important. And that's really where the rates overall come from and where the rate increases come from based on what we're going to be doing. The capital plans are the result of numerous meetings between staff and each department. These rate increase or these capital plans that you're looking at have been shared with Utility Financial Solutions and have been incorporated into the work that they're doing, not only for the water, wastewater, but also for electric and telecom. So we've worked closely with them. So these numbers that you're seeing here are the same numbers that they have. And not going to touch anything specifically. Most of these things that 2024 have either been presented to you or will be presented. So we'll pop up over to the summaries, Nikki, which come right after this. All right, and I will go through these, I think, in the order. Yeah, so what we're looking at right now are the financial, against the budget projection summaries. They're real brief summaries of longer documents. And again, they are the results of meeting with each department, reviewing our staffing requirements, looking at the cost of materials, maintenance costs, and of course the capital costs that we just talked about. When we put these together, we are looking at our current year-to-date costs. So a lot of the times we're working at these, we're looking at 6, 7, 8 months into the year, and then we're projecting into the future based on what we're seeing currently and what we're seeing hopefully in the future. So if we look at the electric fund, one thing I'll say is that our current year budget was very conservative. And if you recall, when we talked a year ago, we had some changes going on in the operation. We had one of our larger customers was switching from one rate to another rate. I'm happy to be able to report that when we talked a year ago and we were kind of saying, hey, our budget doesn't look real pretty for next year in the electric, that got taken care of. So we're now looking at a situation that looks much better. Not only the current year to date, as you can look at your financial summaries in your packet, but also our budget for the future. If you want to talk about any specific things in here, we can. I think the main thing to note is that one of the large customers got off the old special contract rate and is now on the time of use rate. So we have essentially 3 of our largest customers are on the time of use rate, which is it's good for them. It's also a reasonable rate for us. So, and then on the expense side, I will say if you're going through and looking through those, one thing that we do see this year, see a large increase in our distribution costs, and that's really a function of the inflationary factors that we all have talked about this year. It's a cost, supply costs, materials and things like that. So those things are factored into what our plans are. We can get down to the bottom and you can see that, yeah, we're forecasting positive bottom line. And so we'll move on. I think we can move on to, I think we got telecom after that one. So when we look at the telecom fund, that is a fund that, it's funny because we've been saying the same thing for quite a few years in a row. It's a fund that's kind of in flux. A number of years ago, we had our own cable company. We got cable company went away. We went into Skidder. We've had Skidder and we've had the internet, the cable modem. So now Skidder is starting to kind of phase away. Cable modems are phasing out because now we've got the fiber. So one of the main things in budgeting this year is looking at those projections and being able to project up, kind of like we were doing a year ago, project up our installs of the fiber. We're up to about 1,150 customers as of the end of March. Probably today it's a number that's higher than that, but that's a number that continues to increase. And at the same time as that increases, our Skidder customers slowly decrease, and then our cable modem customers are decreasing because a lot of those cable modem customers are switching over to the fiber. You'll see in the telecom fund, we do have a budgeted loss. And again, a lot of that is the factor of ramping up. We got ramp up costs in there as the fiber system continues to, grow slowly. We also have additional labor in there and this year and next year as we again continue to ramp up those into that network. We can pop over to, let's actually talk about water first. I always talk about water before wastewater. So the proposed budget on the water side is again based on working with Dawn and UFS. The revenues are based on an overall 3.5 or 3.9% increase, consistent with what we just talked about. The one thing to note in the water fund, as Dawn mentioned earlier, is that this is the fund where our cash reserves are lower than we'd like them to be. We go through and we do projections every year and calculations on where we should be. And as Dawn noted, we are a little lower. We're aware of that. And so part of what we're doing with the rate increases is trying to get us back to that number, which is a little bit north of $2 million. And then we pop over to the wastewater fund. And again, just as discussed, so the wastewater fund, the 24 budget is based on a 2.9% increase. That's also consistent with the rate study. Cash levels are significantly better in the wastewater fund. However, it's very important to continue to build cash here because, as I think we're all aware of, and we had a presentation last month, we don't know the exact timing of everything, but one thing is certain: we will be putting significant resources into the wastewater treatment plant over the next decade. And so it's important for us to continue to build our cash and to maintain the ability that when and if we do have to issue debt in this fund, and I think it's a when, not an if, that our rates are at a level that we can then support the debt payments on that debt. So. Any questions? And I think I will actually, I'm going to address the question that John had earlier. We talked a little bit when Don talked about on the water side, okay, what happens if we had this small bond, you saw it listed out a number of years ago. So keep in mind that on our capital projections, especially in the water fund, we're trying to be conservative. Those numbers are fluid. We're trying to make sure that we're covering all of our costs. And if you look at the water specifically, you'll see we've got a potential water tower that we might be building out on Jonesville Road. And that's something that's been discussed. We don't know if that's actually going to happen, but the cost of that's roughly, again, who knows what it'll really be. But right now we have $1.5 million factored into that. So what I would tell you is maybe we'll need to build that water tower. Maybe we won't. If we don't, we certainly won't have to issue debt for it. But if we do, that probably means good things are happening out there as far as on a revenue basis. And we haven't forecasted that revenue growth into the model. So,
Thank you.
all right. That's it for me. But happy to entertain any questions.
I think we're all set, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
I think I'm up again, so.
Oh, you up again?
Dang it.
Wastewater, water and wastewater rate adjustments?
You gonna take this? You want me to take this?
Well, did we want to talk about what I was going to show, maybe before we do this, just basically to talk a little bit about the fact that,
Want those?
yes, one of the things that we did in anticipation of obviously coming before the board and talking about rate increases is you always want to know, well, what are our neighbors charging? So we went out and communicated with 13 of our neighbors. And those neighbors are listed right there. And so basically we did this for both water and wastewater and basically tried to compare ourselves to the rates of our customer rates. Essentially, we're talking about residential rates here, 5/8 meter, to the rates paid by, other municipalities within the county and surrounding counties. And so when we went out, we're right there, we're comparing our current rates as we're charging today with the current rates that are being charged by neighboring communities. And kind of consistent with what Dawn had said, you can see that we're in the lower portion of that. There's a couple outliers on the top, but even if you throw out the outliers, we're pretty comfortable and happy with where our rates are compared to where others are. Then on the next slide, essentially what we did is said, okay, well, let's just pretend nobody else raises their rates next year, but we do raise our rates based on what we've just discussed with UFS. And so we take our water rates and we increase them based on the proposed projections. And where do we still fit into essentially this model? Again, being real conservative because we would expect that other communities would raise their rates as well. But assuming we raise our rates, no one else does up here, this is where we would be. So again, we feel that we're still in the lower tier cost-wise. And now we did, of course, the same thing on the wastewater side. Wastewater, we're a little bit closer to the middle, but we've gone through again, done the same thing. One thing that we did, it's just a little bit different than Don. We used, in our projection, we used 5,000 gallons. Don was talking about 6 to 8. Very similar, but the numbers are just a little bit different. So anyway, again, showing where we are wastewater right now and then where we would potentially be next year. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of where we are in the neighborhood.
And just to add to what Tom was talking about, if you guys do approve this and decide to send it over to City Council for approval, it comes out to be roughly a little over a $3 increase per customer on the water and wastewater side when you factor in the 5,000 gallons. So with that, as you've heard the presentation from UFS and Dawn in our cost of service study, and also from Tom in budgeting, what we're requesting is a rate increase of 3.9% on the water side and a 2.9% on the wastewater side. A few years back when we did this, I want to say we're at 1.9 for both. Isn't it 1.9 for
Or
water?
1.9 and 2.9.
2.9. So it went up roughly 1% for each of the utilities. And a lot of that has to do with cost of materials, cost of everything is going up, and we all know that. I also want to address a little bit too, we've talked a little bit about how wastewater has such a larger balance than what water does. And part of that is to make sure that we've done incremental changes to the plant. Instead of going through and doing a lot at once, as it was presented to the City Council and to you guys as well too, about if we went ahead and did the complete plant, what would that impact be to our ratepayers? And it came out to be like $18 per customer. So we're trying to take smaller bites of that apple so that we have some reserves in there, but also we can do a stepped approach to getting this plant expansion done. And this keeps us on that path right now.
So this rate would be effective July 1st.
This would be effective July 1st. It needs to go to city council and then sit for 30 days. So it's projected to be a July 1st increase. Once we get the cost of service done on telecom and electric, that'll be brought back to you guys as well with a presentation. And we'll be looking at a September 1st implementation date on that. And that's just to make sure we get through the summer months and not hit people when the electric bills will go up.
Let's say we pass this, but city council doesn't pass it. Is there a plan B?
We'll have a meeting the next day to discuss what that would be.
Any other questions? You have questions, you just don't want to ask them?
I just wonder, will this get us back to the best tasting water award?
It won't hurt.
Okay.
I think you need Brian to come up here for that, I believe.
It
No,
won't-
I don't have any questions.
It won't hurt. But it'd be staff's recommendation to approve the 3.9 and 2.9 for water and wastewater and approve resolution 23-34 and send that off to the city council for their approval or discussion.
Obviously, rate increases, none of us want to pay it. We
No,
all pay it.
no,
So, we don't want to raise our own bills either, but I kind of feel like even 3.9 and 2.9 is kind of still cutting it pretty tight,
Yes.
but we don't want to go after.
But we can, and I don't like increasing rates either, but we do have things that we do have to take care of. And we can revisit this either way, if things are going better or if they're not.
I need a motion.
Motion to approve the rate increases for water and wastewater.
Support.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is the public electric car charging rate. Back to the director.
Thank you, Mr. President. If you remember, a few years back, we installed a electric vehicle charger on West Chicago, as part of a grant. And just to see, put our toe in the water to see how it would go over. Electric vehicles were in their infancy stage now or then. Now they've evolved to where most of the major manufacturers of automobiles are telling us by 2030, everything's going to be electric. So what we did is we went ahead and put it in another charger over on the southwest corner of Four Corners Park in that parking lot there, another 2-port car charger. So what we started looking at is, so now how do we go ahead and make sure that we're not subsidizing people charging their vehicles? We've done a lot of research. Do we charge by kilowatt hour? Do we charge by time? And a lot of the rates for these public chargers are going by time, unless you're a Tesla charger, and then they just charge it however they want to charge it. So what we're proposing here, which would be the same thing to go into effect July 1st, is a 2-tiered rate. $2 an hour for the first 4 hours of charging and $4 an hour for every hour after that if you choose to park there. The amount of time that it takes to charge a vehicle at the level 2 chargers, depending on how drained the battery is anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. So this is more of just a little top off. We feel also that by putting this rate in there, it gives the individuals that are coming downtown opportunity to shop, eat, walk around, go to a children's museum, whatever they choose to do. But it also allows people to say, you know what, maybe I only want to be there for a few hours because I know that's the cheaper of the 2 rates. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. The individuals would have to download an app, of course, which everything is an app nowadays. Plug in there, put in their app, tell them that we're going to charge here, and then they go ahead and start charging. And then we'd be working through ChargePoint, which is a third-party supplier, who's the supplier that owns we purchased from the chargers, but they'd also be the ones that monitor that as well too. So we feel that this is the wave of the future. And like I said, right now we've got that provided to our customers. It's just a matter now we just need to start recouping some of the cost. Currently, there's going to be an additional charging station at Coldwater, and they're working on one also in the Meyer parking lot. Those would be the only real public access charging points that are coming in the near future. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I'm sure there's a cost for using this app that we have to pay to them, or we're able to recoup that and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
cost of the charger and maintenance and all of that.
Everything based on these rates would recover our costs. I can't give you the exact number of years that'll be recovered in, but because that's all based on how many people charge.
Mhm.
But this $2 and $4 will recover our energy cost as well as go towards the capital investment for it.
How much usage do those get right now?
Last I checked, I want to say there's 3 or 4 vehicles that consistently go down there. 70 to 80 kilowatt hours a month is what's charged. And how that relates to the amount of time that's down there, it's hard to tell based on how each of the batteries reacts to the usage. We're anticipating more as we get more and more electric vehicles out there. We're starting to see more and more, and there's a lot more city council members that are asking when we're going to have a downtown charger as well.
Are we getting grants for these chargers, do you know?
Currently, because of the way that it's all set up and the way that the government is putting them together, no. Because even though we are in part of that infrastructure corridor that they keep talking about, they keep on bypassing what our criteria is. But we're going to continue pushing as much as we can to do that. I actually had a nice conversation with Representative Fink about what we're planning on doing and if there's money available for that.
Any additional questions? See none, what is the decision of the board?
I would make a motion that we accept the public electric vehicle charging rate and put it into effect.
Got a motion?
Second.
Got a motion and a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes.
Thank you. And just for clarification, this will go to city council as well too. And since it is a new rate, it will go as an ordinance change.
Next on the agenda is the 5-year inspection and preventative maintenance. Andrew, you are up.
Thank you, President Stevens, and good evening, members of the board. As mentioned, going to be talking to you guys about some upcoming substation maintenance that we have proposed at the Garfield substation, as well as our project for generation facility. So just as an overview, we perform different maintenance items at different intervals. So as an example, we're doing weekly inspections where we're doing a visual, checking gauges, things of that nature. Not so much invasive, more just keeping an eye on the facilities. On a monthly basis, we'll check more important systems like battery chargers and IWA station, things of that like. On a biannual basis, we will pull an oil sample from the transformers and from the load tap changers and see how those are performing. Check on the health by looking at the buildup of combustible gases and other items like that, like moisture in the transformer. Then on a annual basis, we may clear out birds' nests and things like that as they build up. So what we are proposing is what we perform on a 5-year basis, much more invasive. We would actually be taking outages on equipment, not to actual customers, just on the equipment themselves to do a deeper dive. This would be targeting assets like our transformers, our breakers, our switch gear, our switch assemblies, our full battery system, things like that. On the transformers, we would be checking the bushings, checking the health. We would be replacing the oil in the load tap changer. It has a mechanical mechanism inside that builds up soot and degrades the oil. So for good maintenance, we'll be changing that out. So as mentioned, this would be for the Garfield substation. This was last performed in 2018, as well as the project for generation facility off of Fillmore Road. That plant was built in 2014. Just due to timing, this will be the first time this plant has performed an inspection. Project 4 has less equipment down there, which is why it's much cheaper. We'd essentially be looking at the battery systems as well as function testing the breakers and the relays. As a reference, the transmission systems are required to function test their relays on a 10-year basis. As a distribution utility, we're not regulated. but we perform that on a 5-year basis just to make sure that the relays are going to operate when called upon to not damage the equipment. So for the Garfield substation, we would be looking at $45,000 and change, with project 4 being roughly $6,000 for a combined total of $51,625 for both locations. We would be targeting this work in the fall. We would be looking at about a week-long outage to isolate, perform the work on each bus section. We would combine these schedules together as project 4 is from a dedicated breaker out of the Garfield substation. So it wouldn't make sense to take an outage and then need to take a separate outage at that facility. We had reached out to 6 contractors to request a proposal. We had heard back from 3. Turner Electric Services was the low bidder. We had worked with Turner in the past before. They had performed our substation inspection at the Michigan Avenue location back in 2020, if I remember correctly. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So Turner did the last inspection. Have we had any experience with Eaton or UIS?
So Eaton used to be our sole source provider of this work for a number of years. And we had requested going out for additional bids just to see where the market was. And what we found was Eaton was about 2 to 3 times what everybody else was. So by doing this through a bidding process, we were able to realize significant savings. Eaton is top notch, but they also come at a price. You can also see that there's a little bit of price separation between the 3 bids, with UIS and Eaton being relatively close, but much higher. Eaton's value, quite honestly, did not surprise me. UIS, I'm assuming maybe they have a busy schedule. Maybe this is subcontracting some of the work. Maybe they're bidding overtime, items like that to explain the increased cost. UIS we work with fairly regularly at the substations, at our other facilities around town as well.
Thank you.
Nothing else for him? Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
We need a motion if we want to approve the bid from Turner Electric Services for the 5-year inspection and preventative maintenance at the Garfield Substation, Project 4 generation facility, for the amount of $51,625.
I'll make a motion to approve the bid for Turner Electric Services.
Thank you.
I'll support.
Got a motion and support? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is a Safety Award of Excellence. Harold, you are up.
Thank you, President Stevens and the board. This is not an award for the best tasting water, but we was awarded the APPA Safety Award of Excellence. This is based on our electric department only, how many exposed hours of work they have. So we didn't have any recordable injuries from our electric department for 2022. We submit the award, and 283 other utilities across the United States annually have submitted for this award for the last 65 years. We earned the award in category C, which is utilities with 30,000 to 59,000 annual hours of exposure. And out of those, only 15 utilities was awarded the first place award this year. So overall, what APPA looks at is our state of our safety programs and the culture basically that we've established in our safety. And if we've had any of the recordable injuries throughout the year. So is there any questions about the award we got? I think we're gonna post this down in our electric department. It'll be posted down there since it's basically an electrical utility award.
Congrats.
Yeah, nice.
Good job.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
your
you.
hard work.
Yeah.
I know you
No
have something to do with
questions?
that too.
Thank you.
Yep. Next on the agenda is the virtual infrastructure refresh, and that is Pat.
Thank you. Good evening, President Stevens, board members. What we're looking to do here is the virtual infrastructure that we have now is three appliances made by Nutanix Corporation. We bought those in 2017. They are end of life in October for support. So we could continue to run them, but they would be unsupported. We've got about 42 servers running on that equipment. It's a pretty broad range between the city and the BPU. If you look at all the different industries that we have to run. That really comes down to, less than $6,000 a server for the price that we're looking at here. Nutanix is a great environment. We've loved using it. I think they probably heavily discounted us on that first year to kind of get us hooked, because you could see the price has really increased from the last time we did it. This will require us, the IT staff, to do quite a bit more work than if we would have just got the upgraded to the new Nutanix devices, because then we could put those in place and they would just kind of merge into the environment. Now we have to move and actually transfer them to a different hypervisor, which is going to take some internal work. But for the difference in cost, we thought that was probably prudent. I included the 5-year cost because if you look at the moving to the cloud, it looks, wow, 51,000. Why don't we do that one? But when you start looking at the overall cost over a 5-year period, the scale solution, which is the one we're going to recommend, actually is fully supported through that entire 5-year period. With the Azure cloud, the 5-year support is Microsoft only. And I don't know if anybody's ever tried to call Microsoft, but it is not a pleasant experience. I don't want to worry about, our financial systems being down and having to call them and depend on them to get it back up. It also doesn't include what we're going to do with the SCADA servers because those aren't quite ready for cloud yet. Whereas in the final solution there, the 237 is 66041. That covers every server that we're currently doing, all nicely in a package with support for 5 years. We've talked to several different customers of theirs, and I think the oldest one was 11 years that he'd been with them. And they were considering upgrading. They are 6 years in. They're considering upgrading, but they found the scale would continue to support them with some upgrades to their equipment, so they were able to save some money there. That was a promising thought. But most of the vendors are really shortening up the windows to try to keep that revenue flowing. So I wouldn't say that I guarantee anything over 5 years, but it's possible. So I guess we want to bring this to you a little earlier than what we usually bring it to you in July 1st area. But with lead times and a deadline of October, we kind of want to get that lead time clock started so that it gets delivered more around the July 1st area, and then we can get it transferred over. This is one when talking with finance, they want the BPU to just go ahead and purchase this, and then the city would pay an access fee over those 5 years for the portion of the servers that they're using on that infrastructure. So what I'm looking for is approval for $237,660.41 to get this new equipment ordered.
Any questions for Pat on any of the?
How much would the city end up? Roughly, is it 50-50? Is it 40-60?
You got to help me, Tom. I told you.
Had this conversation.
Somebody would
Is it
have.
100% maybe?
That's what I was thinking.
You're really putting me to test tonight. I think from our conversations with Pat, based on our last one, the Nutanix version, I think we have factored in it's the city side is about 25%. The reason it's a little lower than you might think is partly due to the fact that on the city side, we're very public safety intensive, about half of everything is public safety. Public safety has a different mechanism for data storage. So that's the biggest thing there. And I actually factored in the budget. We're going to pay, the city's going to pay off in 4 years, not 5. So,
Okay.
you know.
Wow. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Tom.
I think that's it.
All right,
Thanks, Pat.
thank you.
What is the desire of the board?
Your turn.
All right, motion to approve the adaptive technology solutions.
Support.
Great.
Got a motion to support? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Next is public comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So first, we talk about our power cost adjustment. So this month's PCA is 0.00768, and on the secondary meters, it's 0.00791. Looking at gas projections for today, they're still ranging in the $2 to $3 range over the next year, but I'm sure that will change as things ramp up and things change accordingly. So right now, we're going to enjoy the lower prices with a lower PCA cost. Just to let everyone know that sidewalk repairs are underway. The sidewalk project for the year with the city is underway. So if you've seen those yellow cones or the orange cones in the sidewalk, they're replacing sidewalks out there. In addition to that, I know this isn't on here, but just to remind everyone that the MDOT is doing work on West US 12 over the bridge. So it's down to 1 lane in each direction. So please use caution as you're going through that area. The next item is our first annual or first ever CBPU City Blood Drive. We do now have a date of June 6th at Heritage Hall from 10 a.m. till 3:30 p.m., 3:45? 3:45.
June 6th or June 26th?
I'm sorry, June 26th. I mixed the 20 in there. So June 26th, yes, Monday, June 26th. So the sign up and will be posted shortly for, we're trying it just internally first, but that is open to the public if they sign up as well. Just a reminder that, you know, this weather will change eventually and you will need to turn on your ACs. So if you do, we are still offering the $75 rebate program for getting your AC tuned up. It's recommended every 2 years. And there's a link on there, or you can get the link from our website as well to go ahead and get that done and get that rebate applied for. Strawberry Fest, they're still looking for booths. That is June 17th in downtown. The registration deadline is June 1st. After that, there'll be a $25 late fee. So just to let the public know that if they want to put a booth in Strawberry Fest, it's time to go ahead and get that done. An item that is not on here is our customer satisfaction survey. We're in the final stages of getting all those questions put together. And that is anticipated to be released to the public here in the next couple of weeks. So by mid-May is what we're being told right now, that the public will be able to either get a phone call or scan a QR code to be able to go ahead and take that survey. And we really encourage everyone to take that survey because it helps us to design what we need to do in the future. One, for communication, how we're doing, how's our customer service, not only in this building, but also in the field. It helps us to prepare for the future. So please recommend to your neighbors and friends to go ahead and take that survey. And also just a reminder that Memorial Day is May 29th and the city and the BPU offices will be closed. And that is my report, other than we have a thank you note here on behalf of the Jane Hurley family.
And I did a little digging. I couldn't find her dates of service for the BPU, but she was here 42 years as an executive secretary. So obviously probably before Sue Rubley, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, so I was here when Sue was here. Okay, thank you, Director. Any questions for him? No. Date of the next meeting?
June 7th. Scott promises he'll be here.
Sure.
Is there anything else? Seeing none, we're adjourned.